Good morning, everybody, and welcome to Cologne. Welcome to our 1.5-day session on the amendments to Part 21. These 28 pages of changes to that regulation that we all know very well, that we have worked on with since 2003. The last amendment, the last bigger amendment that we had to that regulation was in 2015, the last bigger one, the last amendment 2016. So since some years now, for the first time, we have a bigger change to that regulation. We would like to introduce these changes today to you. Would like to explain a little bit the ideas behind these changes, why we have proposed to the Commission to go in that direction, and also show you how we think you can comply and apply these regulations, how we will apply these changes to the regulation. So it should be a bit of a mix of a theoretical introduction of what has changed with a practical side on how can we all apply best these changes to Part 21. My name is Michael Gerhardt. I'm managing in the Certification Directorate the Initial Airworthiness Specifications section, which is the team that has developed this proposal. So the rulemaking idea came out of my team, and we have proposed these changes to the Commission. Today I've brought 4 of my colleagues. The 4th one is still hiding, to help me, to support me explaining these changes to you. So, Rob, if you want to start introducing yourself.
Sure. My name is Rob Boersma. I'm Senior DOA Team Leader, and I've witnessed this rulemaking task from almost the start to hopefully a good finish that we can show you today. Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Leonardo Capacci. I'm a Regulation Officer, and I spent the last 3 years working on the rulemaking task 262, which is the one that generated the changes we are reviewing today. I'm working with Michael.
Oh, maybe I get up that you can all see me. My name is Ralf Bader. I'm the Chief PCM for Initial Airworthiness and PCM for A350. So, and all of us, as well the last one, Michael will introduce. We will provide you the presentation during the next 2 days.
So the 5th colleague that will be with you today is Stefano Fico. He is Senior PCM and he is the specialist on the general aviation side of it. So he will join us within the next 30 minutes and he will also share his thoughts about Part 21 with you. So while we have prepared a bit of material to present the changes to Part 21 to you today and tomorrow, I think what is most important is that you make it your days. So please, if you don't understand what we are talking about, if you have questions, if you need clarification, please ask questions. We have prepared some dedicated slots at the end of what we think is a combined block of topics. So I will then open the floor on these occasions as well, but please also interrupt us if something is not clear. I think it's best that when we're talking about something that we immediately ask the question, that you have the possibility to clarify. We do have sufficient time for that. We have given this training already twice, so it's the 3rd session. We do have enough time for that, so please feel free to ask as many questions as possible. Should at any point in time I see that it's too many questions and we risk that we can't talk about everything by tomorrow lunch, then I will let you know and we will reply to these questions later. But in the first 2 sessions with many questions, we were very well on timing. So please make it your day. If you need clarification, if you have questions, please interrupt us. We do have microphones, so then one of us will go around and give you the microphone so that everybody is able to understand the questions. So, what is our journey for today and tomorrow? In the beginning, now this morning, I will give you a brief high-level introduction on these changes to Part 21, and then we immediately dive into probably the biggest change to that regulation, which are the changes related to the certification process, application process for TC, STC, major changes and major repairs. And in this big block we will also talk about level of involvement, which is one of the biggest topic which you probably have heard before. We will continue that part of the journey definitely until the lunch break, and probably already still in the early afternoon. You see it's quite a big block that is in front of us. And after lunch we will then look into the minor changes and minor repairs and ETSO other than APU. So there we look into the changes to the certification process and also the aspects of level of involvement for these processes. And then depending on the timing, we will probably still start today, otherwise tomorrow morning, with all the changes, a comprehensive overview of all the changes that are relevant for you as an approved design organization. So here we're talking predominantly, but not only, about subpart J. That will continue tomorrow morning and probably until the coffee break. And then after the coffee break we will introduce to you some other changes, smaller changes in part 21. There's something on the permit to fly, there's something on the environmental requirements, there's something on the inspection and testing. So small changes that are not immediately visible. But throughout these days we want to show you everything that is new in part 21. And then in the end we still have a big session planned if there are still some open questions. Sorry, I forgot the last bit. In the end we will show you when the different parts of part 21 amendment will become applicable. I will already give you a brief introduction highlight in my first presentation. Throughout the presentation we will repeat this, and then there's a summary of the applicability dates at the end of the presentation tomorrow, because it's not straightforward. And I think it's important that you understand as of when do you have to comply with which parts of these changes. So let's start. Let's see what is new for us in part 21. In this first chapter of today, we have structured the information in the following way. I would like to briefly introduce you the purpose of the event. That is pretty obvious. And then I will give you a high-level overview of the changes to part 21, which are embedded in this regulation 2019-897. Then we will show you what material, what documentation is available to you apart from the regulation that supports the application of that regulation. And I will give you a high-level insight, reminder, refresher of what are we talking about when we are talking about part 21, AMC to part 21, the guidance material to part 21, and how are these used and how are they related to each other. And related to that, it's more an introduction to the last bit of this intro session. How are we going to present to you the changes to part 21? You will see that we are not only going to show you what is new in part 21, but also we are going to show you what is new in the AMCs and in the guidance material. So, why are you here? What's the purpose of the event? You want to learn about the changes in part 21. For my curiosity, I see quite a number of familiar faces. How many of you have already followed, for example, an extensive training on level of involvement that we offered in the past years when the concept was under development? For example, at the Design, Organization and Certification workshop 2 years ago, or at the STC workshop. Who of you have already pretty good idea of what we are talking about? I will remember the faces and I will ask questions. And how many of you have already taken the liberty of studying, reading the regulation or even the AMC and guidance material a bit more extensive than just filing it? Okay, I'm impressed. I have to tell you, you are better than the colleagues in the previous two sessions. There were less people. So we will adapt. So I see it's probably a little bit less than half of you that have already a good picture. So you will probably see some slides, you will hear us talking about similar things that you've heard already, so take this as a refresher. There's also quite a bit of new material there, so don't worry. And then for those of you, that's the target audience of this presentation, who have not so much heard about, have not so much followed this activity while it was in progress. The idea is that we have sufficient information for you to get started, to explain the changes to you, that you can apply it. So, this new regulation, what are we talking about? This is a picture of the amending regulation. The number is 897 from 2019, and it's an amendment to the regulation from 2012, Regulation 748, which includes in its annex Part 21. So it's not a fully new regulation, it's an amendment to the regulation from 2012. It was already adopted in March by the European Commission on the 12th of March, and then there was a holding period where the Council and the Parliament had the possibility to review and potentially veto, what in the end they didn't do. And after that holding period, the Commission published this regulation in the official journal of the European Union on the 3rd of June. And then the first thing that you saw on the second or third page of this document was the entry into force date. It says it enters into force 20 days after publication, which you have to take your calculator, which is the 20th or was the 23rd of June. And then there was a transitional measure, a deferred applicability provision, which said that some parts have a deferred applicability date of 9 months. So again, taking the calculator, we end up with, for most of the contents, an applicability date of 23rd March 2020. Actually, when you saw this document for the first time in the official journal on the 3rd of June, you couldn't see these applicability dates. The Commission publication service forgot it, so there was still in the version that you may have filed first, there was still to be determined. So you have to open the corrigendum. There, probably a week later, there was a corrigendum that was published in the official journal, which then had these 9 months transition period there. So if you have saved the version which still says in the Article 3, I think it is, to be determined, then you have to download or look for the corrigendum. But that's what are the applicability dates. Very high level. You'll see that some parts of the regulation are already applicable today, since 23rd of June. Few parts only. And most parts will become applicable, formally speaking, on the 23rd of March 2020. But we will also show you in the course of this information session that some bits you already have to apply a little bit earlier. But the latest everything becomes applicable is the 23rd March 2020. So we have from now on until March still a couple of months left to prepare ourselves within the agency. You have time to prepare yourself for the final applicability date for most parts of these changes in March next year. The biggest shock that we may have provided you with this amending regulation I want to present first. And I will also close with that tomorrow in a bit more detail. But be aware that there are quite some changes, not only text changes, not only insertion of new points in Part 21, for example, for level of involvement, but also that some points have moved from Section A to Section B. So certain elements that you are very familiar with, that you know by heart, that you know where you can find them, for example in 21A15 or 21A18, you will not find, or you do not find again in the same point. There's a very simple reason for that. The regulatory structure of all the implementing rules under the basic regulation in the EASA system, and also the idea of Part 21 was to separate the rights and obligations for the regulated entities, industry, and for the competent authority. And the structure of Part 21, how it was built, was Section A is the book that you open when you want to know what you have to apply with. You can basically ignore the Section B, and the competent authorities, NAAs or EASA, they open Section B and they know what their rights and obligations are. But if you went through Section A in the past, you found a lot of rights and obligations for the competent authority. The example that I typically use is the establishment of the certification basis. You find that in Section A, 21A, 16B, 17A, 18. So you find that in Section A. Also, it only addresses the competent authority. So the idea that we had, aside of the contents changes, was to clean up most of that. We didn't clean up everything, but most of that, and we moved certain points, certain parts of points from Section A without changing the contents into Section B. So predominantly you shouldn't be affected, because these are the points for EASA as competent authority. But of course, you know, if you want to know how do I build my certification basis, what are the elements of a certification basis, you are used to check to see this in Section A, while in the future you will find that in Section B. It's a bit of a nuisance, but we'll try to make it as easy as possible for you. We're showing you an animated slide at the end tomorrow morning to give you an idea of what went over to Section B. And even more important, we prepared a correlation table. As part of the AMC and guidance material, you will find at the end a correlation table which shows which parts have been moved from Section A to Section B. Even more, a full correlation table comparing the old version of Part 21 with the new version of Part 21. So in the first weeks, when you are applying this new regulation or this amending regulation, please put this correlation table next to your laptop. It will hopefully help you to find the points that you cannot immediately find back in Section A. And then we have spoken a lot with all of you in the past years about level of involvement, and that's probably one of the reasons why you're also here today. But I wanted to highlight that in this amending regulation, it's not only about level of involvement. This amending regulation is based on 3 different opinions, 3 different proposals from the agency to the European Commission, which followed different timelines, different discussion fora. The rulemaking task 262, which was the task under which we developed the level of involvement concept, but also the new privilege, the possibility for new privileges, for example, for major changes, some new obligations for approved design organizations. All of that was part of the discussion under rulemaking task 262, where we submitted the opinion to the European Commission back in 2016. But there are also 2 other rulemaking tasks. There was an opinion beginning of 2017 related to maintenance check flights. The overall topic was maintenance check flights. And the main target there is the ops world. So it's mainly changing Regulation 965, the ops regulation. Also a little bit the maintenance rules, Part M, the AMC and guidance material to Part M. But there was one proposal to change Part 21. So an amendment to 21A701 the purposes for a permit to fly. And this one change you will also find embedded, and we're going to explain it to you tomorrow. And there was an opinion in end of 2017, opinion number 9, 2017, which proposed to the European Commission to implement the changes to ICAO Annex 16. We have highlighted it here with CAPE 10, that's the 10th cycle of the Committee on the Environmental Protection within ICAO. So the amendments to Volume 1, 2 of Annex 16, the noise and emission requirements, and the new CO2 Volume 3 to Annex 16. This is now embedded in the basic regulation, but now also in Part 21 through this amendment from June. And the purpose today is to present you, we will not further on differentiate which opinion it came from, we just present you all the topics that were included in these three opinions. So obviously you have available the regulation. Of course you should learn it by heart and apply it by the words. You'll find that in the official journal if you have not yet downloaded it. If you don't find it on the Commission website in the official journal, you can also go to the EASA website, and we have provided a link to this amending regulation there. Unfortunately, what we don't have available today is a consolidated version. So you still have to work with the old Part 21 and these 28 pages, which only say point 21A15 is amended as follows. Point 21A is deleted. It's a bit cumbersome. On both sides, the Commission and us, we are working on a consolidated version. The policy of the Commission is to publish an unofficial consolidated version very close to the date of applicability. So around March, hopefully a bit before March, you will also find on the Commission website an unofficial consolidated version that is then, as of then, probably the best tool for you to work with. Also within EASA, we are working on a consolidated version together with the AMCs and guidance material. What you may know under e-rules or easy access to rules, our documents. So we're also working on an update of the easy access to Part 21 document, which will also become available but next year. So please don't expect it this year. So all of that will be ready for the applicability date in March. Until then, you still have to work with these two documents in parallel. In addition to the regulation, which is probably a bit more handy for you to understand the rules, we have developed, I would say as usual, acceptable means of compliance and guidance material to Part 21. So we have amended also the AMC guidance material book. So we are now at stage amendment number 9 to the second issue of it. We published it not so long ago on the 29th of August on our website. So if you haven't seen that document yet, I would recommend you to download it. It provides quite some helpful information, the acceptable means of compliance, of course, but also guidance material, giving some interpretation, giving some explanation about the rules that have changed. And today, as I mentioned, and tomorrow, we will present you, of course, both the rule and the means that we would accept to comply with, and also the guidance material. Specifically for level of involvement, we have another guidance document which we published in its final version in July, which is a certification memorandum, which is a guidance material that has not the form of AMC and GM. It didn't follow the rulemaking process. Here you find additional guidance, specifically on level of involvement, and we're going to show you some examples later today, a bit more detail on how to apply level of involvement per panel. So flight specific, hydromechanic specific, cabin specific guidance. We will make an amendment to this CM quite soon. Leo, do you know where we are in the process? Is it still for this week or? Yeah, so you can expect a second issue. We will then simply replace the lower number 001 by 002. The only thing that we are going to do is we are extracting all the AMCs and all the guidance that is now a duplication to the AMC and guidance material. We had used the certification memorandum in the past to already give an idea of the guidance for level of involvement and duplicated that in the AMC and guidance material. Now that the AMC and guidance material is ready and published, we don't need it in the certification memorandum any longer. So we're going to take it out and only put the additional guidance material in the certification memorandum that is not contained in the AMC and guidance material. So this version 2 you will find very, very soon on our website. And then please be aware that we also have a dedicated section on our website under the news item where we give additional information, explanation, especially on level of involvement. What you can find there, for example, are presentations in form of slides, but also videos that we have given to explain the level of involvement concept in the past 2 years. For example, you'll find the video from the design organization and certification workshop that I mentioned before, about 2 years ago. You will find a presentation where Leonardo introduced the level of involvement concept to the STC community at the STC workshop. You'll find more documents there and also the links to the relevant material. So that could be a useful reference for you as well. So, taking now a small step aside, not talking specifically about this Part 21 change, I would like to refresh your memory on what, let me say, the EASA rules are. Just 2 minutes, and just to set the scene how we are going to present to you the changes to Part 21 today and tomorrow. So of course the important document is the regulation, Part 21. There you find your obligations, your rights, the agency's obligations and the NAA's obligation, and also the rights. Who has to do what? That's the main thing. That's what we sometimes call the hard law. But as the hard law is very often very generic, we have to cover a lot of situations. It's not easy to understand, it's not easy to apply. So what we have developed, what we typically develop in the EASA system is what we call acceptable means of compliance, AMC, and guidance material. And this is meant to be supporting documents. It's not law, it's not regulation, it's not coming from the legislator, from the Commission, it's coming from EASA. We give our ideas on how you can comply with the hard law, with Part 21. So these supporting documents have a specific status in our regulatory framework, and you may know that in Part 21, no sorry, not in Part 21, in the cover regulation, there's an Article 10 which gives the competence to EASA to develop these AMCs, especially the AMCs. It explains what they are, and the important thing for the agency and for you to understand is the paragraph 3. When you are using the AMC, then you have something which we call presumption of compliance. So the idea of the AMC is if you comply with Part 21, the way how it's described in the AMC, then you are compliant with Part 21. The agency will not challenge, will not contest that. Sometimes there is no AMC. We do not develop AMC for everything. Then you have to develop your own means of compliance. Sometimes we put 2, what we call maybe alternative AMCs, an AMC1 and an AMC2, where you have two different ways of showing us compliance with. We have some very good examples in the future with the safety management system rulemaking task. Then you can decide which means of compliance is more suitable for me to comply with, but both are acceptable and both will not be contested by the agency. But of course, there's no obligation for you to use the AMCs. They have a benefit for you if you're using them, but the only thing that you need to demonstrate to us is that you're compliant with Part 21. If you're not using the AMC and guidance material, then you have to explain to us how the way you are working, how your procedures are compliant with Part 21, and you have to convince us. It's a bit more cumbersome, but of course it's possible. And to differentiate from that, guidance material don't have this presumption of compliance. Guidance material should just illustrate the meaning. They should help you to read, to understand Part 21. They give explanations, they may give examples, but they don't have this presumption of compliance. I have to admit that today, if you go really nitty-gritty through the AMC and guidance material, we sometimes had the idea of making the AMC and guidance material user-friendly, easier to read, and we combined in one AMC, the AMC and the guidance material to have everything in one provision. And sometimes we have something which has the title guidance material, but if you're honest and you read it, the contents is AMC. We are currently in the process of cleaning this up, so don't take us at the moment really by the point. Sometimes, or you can sometimes even take it positive, you can sometimes use guidance material if the title is guidance material but the content is AMCs, is an AMC, is an acceptable means of compliance. There may also be the presumption of compliance on that one. But we are in the process of cleaning this up to making this clearer in our AMC and guidance material, to really have a clear picture of what is AMC and what is guidance material. Why do I tell that to you? Throughout today and tomorrow, we are going to use some sort of a color coding. You will find always on most of the slides on the right-hand side, right-hand top side of our slides, a color code which is either blue, orange or green and which has a number in it. If the number, let's say 21B100 is in blue, then we are referring to 21B100 in the regulation. If the same number is in orange, then we are referring to the AMC material. If it's in green, then we are referring to the guidance material. So this color also may help you to understand whether we are now talking about something that you have to do, blue, or where you have some support, a means of compliance that will be accepted, then it's orange, or if it's more illustration, explanation, and then it's green. I hope that this color coding will also help you a little bit to understand the concept today and tomorrow, and you can also use it when you are going to develop, for example, your procedures to adapt to the new Part 21. So I've already mentioned to you that we have quite a number of different changes to Part 21 that is embedded in this amending regulation, and the storyline, the idea that we have taken for this info session is that we want to present you the changes in, maybe let's call it a process approach, the way how you would normally start developing your application in order to get to your certificates. So we'll start with the changes that are relevant for your application. We will continue throughout the certification process and then end with the issuance of the certificate. And there you may see changes to the certification program, changes to the certification basis, changes related to level of involvement, the inspections, and then in the end the issuance of the certificate. That's a bit the idea of presenting you the changes today. And then we go on and go into subpart J. So all the changes that are relevant for you as a design organization approval holder, and then the small changes that do not really fit clearly into one of these processes, like the environmental requirements, the permit to fly, we are going to present at the end. So, do you have any introductory questions? Anything from the overview that is not clear to you? If that's not the case, then I just suggest we dive into the contents, and we're going to look into what has changed in the process for TC/STC major changes and major repairs.